Okay, Anthony, Rob, thank you guys for joining.
Thanks for having us.
The positioning messaging people on LinkedIn with the most beautiful graphics. My first question is, who creates your graphics?
We do them ourselves. It was
But do you each create your own? Because they're also, okay. How much
graphics come out of like we send stuff to each other to basically communicate ideas and things we're bumping into in the work we do with founders and these startups. And then they usually kind of iterate off of the feedback we give each other that we're creating separately and posting separately.
Do you ever reuse something where like Rob creates something and then Anthony's like, oh, I'm totally going to steal that graphic?
We do, but not usually as posts, though we have talked about that. We're like, we could totally do that. We haven't really done that yet, but a lot of times the biggest source of our graphics is to communicate, or not even source, I should say, like the purpose of them is both for LinkedIn growth, but an actual more real world application is we use them to communicate ideas to the clients we work with. So like the bulk of our workshops, maybe I shouldn't say bulk, a bulk of our workshops is explaining some of these concepts to helping the founders understand the decisions they need to make.
Sure.
And using these different graphics to explain it. So like in our Figma file, and actually maybe this will be fun for everyone to see, but like this behind the scenes,
Yes.
this is my LinkedIn post file, which is a joke. And then let me jump to the other one without showing all the clients.
Cassandra is laughing.
Yeah. So we have I'll show you that one. And then this was the other one I was going to show was that. So we have like when we are working with clients, we have this like helpful concepts section. So there will be multiple times where someone will say something. Let's say like one of the people on the calls is like, we really think we need a message to the CEO. Like, we need this homepage to speak to the CEO because that's who signs the check for our product. Then we could be like, oh, well, we actually have a take on that. And we'll slide over and be like, we think in general, the best champion for someone to write the website for is actually someone in the middle, because the CEO is going to be too far away from the pain, and someone down here like an IC is going to be too far from like being able to influence other people in the org. So like we're constantly sliding over here and showing different concepts, and these are both created by me and Rob. So like we will pitch, basically use each other's things all the time. So like this one I've used on probably 50 different calls that Rob came up with this. I was like, this is the most brilliant thing he had created at that point, maybe. And I just thought it was amazing. And basically it was like,
then it's been all downhill, Rob. That's what he said.
Fatigue too early.
It's only gotten better. But like basically so many people come in at this exact moment. They're like, I have, we're doing $1 million in revenue, but it's from 5 different groups with 5 different use cases. This way is obviously better. It's like, this is so much more scalable if you have it from one segment that can really, pour gasoline on the fire. So long answer to your question, but just showing a little bit behind the scenes. We make all the stuff in-house, and like we started at one point using components in Figma. So like you can use reusable components. We slowly made our own like makeshift design system, but nowadays, because we do it so much, it's just sometimes easier to just remake the things from scratch. Like we're going to make we'll make a little thing and we'll, give it a little drop shadow. And so it sort of becomes, throw some layout on there, right? And say,
I saw the question in chat as Anthony's doing this. Karin had asked, do we come from a design background? And so Anthony and I, when we met, we were working at a digital product studio, and it was a pretty aggressive point that was made to us that we are not designers. And maybe taken that as like a chip on our shoulders. And so we spent the last like 2 years living in Figma, building and breaking down and rebuilding all these things. And so I would say we've leveled up our own design work on our own, but do not come from a dedicated design.
Yeah, we definitely not. But you can see, right? Like this is, we have some stuff pre-built, but that's like how we sort of lock it in to make it feel like it's all one cohesive design system. And then, as ChatGPT image generation became fun, we started using things like that, right? Like you've probably seen these types of posts where we're showing these people, they're all just 100% fake, right? But we layer on some.
Which model? Who created those AI things?
ChatGPT. It's just in like the image generation.
Okay. And then, so you start out with like a customer or client saying something or having a question, and then you kind of almost create a graphic to solve that or to address it or to answer that question. How long might a graphic take? Because it's not just creating the graphic, it's actually thinking through what you want to say to that, right?
Yeah, it probably would range. Yeah, I will. It's like some ideas are really easy to where we're like, oh, I know exactly how I'm going to do it. We create the image and write the posts. It takes an hour. I would say on average, though, each post, at least for me, is somewhere in the 90-minute to 3-hour range, like fully curated, fully written up. Sometimes faster, sometimes shorter. Anthony, I would say, is a little bit faster in Figma. And so you might cut that time down a little bit on your end. I don't know if you have anything to add there, Anthony.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it depends kind of what the image is, right? Like there's some that are like, some of our best posts ever were like so stupidly simple. And then other ones where it's like so complex and it just completely flops. So that's what's annoying about it. It's not like an effort in equals, the right output. But yeah, they'll take varying degrees of time. The really, really in-depth ones can take really long. And like you said, a lot of it's like conceptualizing it in your mind. So like, me and Rob will talk on the phone all the time. And so we'll come up with a post idea. And sometimes it's like the visual just hits you. And I'm like, oh, I know exactly how I'm going to design that. I could sit down and make it really, really quick. Yeah. Other times, I know, Rob, sometimes you'll sit down and almost use the drawing process to sort out the idea, which then like you're kind of thinking about the concept and that makes it take longer. But it's just what you're starting with.
And to add on that, I guess, most of the posts, the better ones are when you have the clear argument already there. Either you've used it in a session or you have the write-up and then you're like, all right, I'm going to go visualize this. To Anthony's point, there is some creative, I guess, iterative flow that'll happen when you're like, I know some pieces here, and you're using the visual more as a brainstorming session, but that takes a little bit more time because you really don't know. You're kind of stumbling around in Figma until you're like, there's something here. Which almost creates the ideas. And so those are loosely the two workflows that we follow and how we create.
So you said the whole post might take you anywhere from 90 minutes to 3 hours, let's say 2 hours on average. If you post daily, that's 10 hours you spend every week just creating your LinkedIn content.
Sounds about right.
Probably.
Sometimes less, sometimes more.
Okay, I just want to
more
in that because I think so many people want to get a lot more done with a lot less time, and I think one of the reasons why there are two big reasons that jump out to me why your stuff works so well. One, you guys are actually experts in the trenches, working with clients, doing this sort of work. So you have an engine. You're not just thought leaders that pontificate about things that you thought of in the shower. These are things that come up during client engagements. And then two, you also actually spend a lot of time on actually thinking it through and creating it and writing it up and doing that. So how important to your guys' LinkedIn success do you guys judge the graphics to be? Like if you would just be, okay, we're doing the same work, we're, product marketing consultants, and you write up your posts instead of having these elaborate graphics.
I think they're incredibly important. And it's really funny. When we started, like we were following in the footsteps of people like Elena Verna, and she would do screen grabs of frameworks from Miro. And so, with the sticky notes and the arrows. And so we were like, ooh, we should try that. So we did them in Miro. And then for a while we were getting bogged down because Miro doesn't let you do that much stuff. Like you have some sticky notes, some arrows, some shapes. So like, we need to make it better. So we basically remade what we did in Miro in Figma so that we could start adjusting it more. And then we would share the frameworks. And so I do think that because of the group we're targeting, which is people in software, they just love frameworks. Like people they just love them. And so we're like, the more that we can conceptualize these things in visuals, I think the more it helps. And the crazier the visuals get, there's a fun little side hack that happens where people will be scrolling on LinkedIn, they'll see the visual and they'll say, wow, there's so much here. I should come back to this later, and they'll save it. And then LinkedIn sees that as a sign of like, ooh, this must be so valuable. And I'm giving my older brother some coaching. He's trying to start a side hustle. He's also trying to sell to software people. It's a completely different niche. He's doing like public speaking coaching and stuff. And I was like,
what is LinkedIn? So people can at least give him a little look.
Vincent Pierri is his name. So I just dropped it in. So the funniest thing is he's starting from scratch. And in like 5 months, he's gone from like no followers at all to I think he just crossed 6,000. He's adding now like 400 or 500 like every couple weeks. And he's doing just these ridiculously high effort diagrams and frameworks about like writing a talk for a conference, how to deliver public speaking advice, things like that. And the same thing is working. And he sent me one. He's like, I did a carousel and it's basically 51 slides long. And each one is like a giant diagram. He's like, it took me I can't even imagine how many hours, and it's just reaping the benefits. For like at the beginning, he was like, maybe I should try to make it so I can post twice a day. And I was like, LinkedIn is more of a meritocracy than a lot of these platforms. And it really is more like the higher effort wins. And like if you try to get big, let's say on Instagram, I love this example. I was on Instagram one day, I'm scrolling through reels and I look and there's this person who drew this giant picture of a bridge. And it's like a photorealistic bridge. And they're like, wow, this looks so amazing. And it zooms in and it shows how he made it. He used a typewriter and he was typing line by line with letters to draw the bridge. And he made this incredible photorealistic thing. And I was like, that's the level of content on Instagram that you're competing with. And then you log into LinkedIn and it's like someone doing like a really bizarre angled selfie. And it's like, here's 5 things I learned about B2B
I
sales.
canceled my one-on-one with my team and
Exactly. And so like, if you're just like, the bar is so unbelievably low on LinkedIn that if you just try a little harder than everyone else, don't try to automate it. Don't try to write it just all with AI, all the hacks. Just like actually try to write something thoughtful and create like a probably higher effort graphic to go along with it. If you're targeting people in the software world as your audience, like they will just love it.
And I'll just add one note. I think it's relative to what other people are doing to that same persona. We had a customer and they sold to operations leaders in manufacturing on LinkedIn, right? Super uncrowded, not a lot of people trying to talk to that persona. And so like just simple videos popped off because it just stood out. No one was doing videos. Now, if you're talking to B2B SaaS marketers, like there's a ton of people who do videos. So just making a video will not somehow make you stand out or add extra effort. So then you need to kind of go the extra mile from there and then the extra mile from there. And now people are sharing this whole like, whole playbooks. You need to comment playbook to get the thing. And they spent 7 hours on just creating it. I saw you guys gave away some of your templates too. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Rob, if someone said, I want to do these graphics and I really love them and no, actually I have another question before that. When you guys started out with this Miro thing, the Miro board, how much engagement did you guys get initially?
So there's a couple stories there.
Okay.
One of Anthony's, he says it's his first. I'm pretty sure it was his second post on LinkedIn went viral, and it had nothing to do with product marketing. It was like how to use a user story map to take notes, I believe. And it got in examples was the Miro, and it had all these reference points. And so that visual, because I think a visual was with it just in Post-its, popped off. In general, though, the early posting, for the most part, we were posting, I'll say, into the void for the first 6 months. Trying to, and you have to remember, we, at the time when we were starting to post on LinkedIn, we didn't have a service. The work we were doing was much more dynamic scope. We were part of a digital product studio. It was product strategy, it was go-to-market strategy, it was design, it was development. And so when we started posting, it was mostly about startups, some positioning, some growth, some product stuff, but it was a little all over the place. So we were very much making noise and listening for signal. And it took us a while to figure out where and how to narrow. And ultimately what happened early on is the one of the insights we had looking at thousands of B2B homepages, mostly from a prospecting point of view. We're like, how do we sell to these? We couldn't figure out what any of them did. And this is like that conversation Anthony and I kept as a thread that's still going on 2 years later. No one can explain what they do. And so it was when we started to aim kind of the content in that direction, we started to pick up a lot of signal. Founders were like, oh my gosh, I had the same problem. Or like, wait, what do you think of my homepage? And that brought us down a more narrow land of positioning and messaging and early stage. And every time we niched down, and it's very counterintuitive, the more specific we got, the more engagement and more reach we got. And so most people think, if I want to get more, I need to do more and talk about more stuff. It's the exact opposite. And so early days, not a lot of people there. Once we started getting signal, just kept getting more and more specific and drilling into the same problem. Oh, nice.
This was
second post?
This was what is it? It's so chaotic looking. You can't
read anything.
anyone, and you can't read any of it. And for whatever reason, and I don't know why it's not showing the impressions. It was like, I can't remember, it was like 200,000 or 300,000.
Wow.
And we started getting all these connect requests from all these people. And this was back in the day when you could still tag someone, and if they interacted with it, the post would like drawn out everywhere. I think
Paid into their audience.
yes, they've since changed the algorithm. It doesn't really do that anymore. People do this all the time, is like trying to use the old playbook of tagging all these people, and then it just doesn't really do anything anymore. But now, like when I did it, some of them commented. I think Elena, yeah. So she said, I do all my work in Miro, all of it, and then that got 74 likes, and then it was off to the races from then. And then the other part that was even funnier was, so we were in this company, and I posted it, and you know, we had been trying to figure out a way to scalably get clients and things like that. And so everyone was like, "Oh, this is so lame." And then you know, I started posting on LinkedIn, and it was like, what a cringe platform. And like, look at Anthony making everyone kind of making jabs. And then the second post I did after this one also went viral, and it was another completely unrelated.
You're setting completely the wrong expectations for everyone on this call.
Go viral from day one.
Well, yeah, but to Rob's point, so this second one though, I tagged a different big guy, Brian Balfour, who founded Reforge. He came up with this framework called the 4 Fits. And so the post that I had, I only had these 2 ideas to start the LinkedIn career. I had the using user story maps to take notes on books. That was my one. That was the first one. And then my second one was, I'm in a pop punk band with my friends. And I was like, I'm going to use Brian Balfour's 4 Fits model to grow our pop punk band. So then I put it in his framework of how we were going to scale our band on Spotify and stuff like that, and then shared it with him, and then he reshared it. And then someone I knew who worked at Reforge was like, he shared it in the all hands meeting, and everyone was laughing. And so those 2 posts were great. But then to Rob's point, it was 6 months of nothing. It was like 6 months of like 2 likes, 3 likes, 4 likes.
And that was as you guys were already creating these Miro boards, so like putting quite a bit of effort and time into them.
That's a good question. I mean, we could probably look back. It was like a bunch of things. We were trying all sorts of different stuff. And like Rob said, we were iterating behind the scenes on what type of service we could create. It's like one week we'd be like, maybe we should do a pricing for PLG companies. And we were like, maybe we'll become pricing experts. And Rob would spin up like a pricing deliverable and a packaging, thing. And we try to sell it. Nobody would want it. And then Rob and another guy that we were working with, they were like, maybe we'll do account list building. We'll work with sales teams. We'll help them build giant account lists, get down really, really hyper specific. And a lot of these stuff ended up like ideas from it, making it into the current service. But it took so long to find home pages and positioning as this thing together. And it was really getting pulled in and out from the market. Like people started pulling us one direction because originally when we started thinking, maybe we'll do something with positioning, we loved April Dunford. We had read her book, and we were like, maybe that's the angle that we'll do. And we were like, well, how do we evaluate people's positioning? So we started looking at people's websites to see if we could like extract what we think the positioning could be. And then people started being like, oh my gosh, can you help me fix my positioning and my website? Because clearly the website's messed up. And that was like the initial impetus that pulled us down that route away from all these other different potential service ideas.
I want to go back to it because I think most people on this call, they probably haven't yet started posting on LinkedIn, or they maybe started recently. And what you just told me is okay, Anthony, you got your 2 posts to go viral, but that's not the norm, Rob. That didn't happen to you. So you don't have a service yet. You're posting for 6 months. No one cares. You're getting 2 likes per post while spending a lot of time writing these things and creating these Miro boards and putting time into it. Like, what's the motivation? I mean, most people would stop after a month of getting 2 likes, and they're like, this is clearly not working. You guys kept going and kept going. And now you're the overnight success, let's say, but like, how do you keep motivated?
Yeah. So to be clear on the no one cares phase, getting a person to reach out to you, like I remember waking up every morning when we were first starting, and it was like 2 connection requests, and it was like an exciting thing. You connect, you reach out, you start to get a conversation going. Those early adopters are very active. And so even those 2 comments we got on a post would turn into conversations in DMs where it's like, what are you doing? Some of them are peers, some of them are founders. They're just curious about the stuff we're writing about. That is addicting in a good way, where it's like, oh my God, I woke up, I had 3 connection requests and then 4. And so you actually start to create this peer network where you were getting small signals of like, it was really cool what you posted. I have no idea if it helps anyone. I thought it was neat. So those are like the small indicators to keep going that just kind of pull you along, even though the business side of it didn't actually come until months later. And so you should still be listening for signal. Just don't listen for it of like, did I go viral? It's more, did anybody care?
Right.
And we did get some of those come in on more of a daily basis. And then as that snowballs, we then got to use all those interactions as a test bed for a service, just getting into effectively sales conversations naturally. Anthony, I don't know if you had something else from a motivation standpoint.
Oh, I mean, my
That's
motivation was a lot more live or die. So
Keep the
I had
job.
Yeah, I had a long career not in tech. So I transitioned to tech like very late in life. I had always done something with content.
in life, or as they so
Hey, look at this guy, AARP over here.
So I came into tech, and I'd always done stuff with content, like for every different job in the past. So like that was one piece that I had, but it wasn't like an asset when I came in. I came into the agency with me and Rob as basically an entry-level salesperson. And I always was like good at like very ambiguous tasks. So like people would be like, we want to figure this thing out. We don't know if we can do it. We'll put Anthony into it. So the company that hired me, where I met Rob, was basically like we had done no outbound sales as an agency, and we thought maybe we could try it. And so we heard Anthony, like through one of my old bosses connected us, and was like, maybe Anthony can help figure out outbound sales. So I come in and I'm trying to figure out outbound sales. I'm trying to learn everything that I can. And it was like immediately a lot of the stuff that we preach now, like I saw the problems if you don't do this at the beginning, because the agency would sell to anyone. We would sell to Fortune 500 companies. And then we worked with a fitness Instagram influencer. And it was like, we're building a weird app for Huggies diapers to live on their website. And then we're, doing product strategy training, and we're helping this startup launch an MVP. So all that stuff, it was like,
If there was like a
let's do something about
scale
sales.
of ICP, it's like literally the two ends. It's like
yeah, so and CRFP was and Fortune 500 span the whole scale.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was, the ICP was, do you have money and will you give it to us in exchange for work? And that was
Most businesses.
yeah. So I'm like trying to figure out this outbound thing, and I would ask our founder, I'd be like, who should I reach out to? And he'd be like, who do you think? I'd be like, like we could, and I was like, so we're looking at the clients. Was there any commonality? We had worked with like 2 logistics companies. So maybe we could be a logistics firm, right? They're like, no, we don't want to do that. We work with like 2 fintech companies. Like, maybe it's fintech. So we'd spend all this time researching fintech, spend all these outbound. And so like I did this for basically 9 months with no success, no clients. We got close to a couple, nothing. So I'm like worried about my job, and I'm like, you took a bet on me and not panning out. And then I was like, basically, can you transition me to a different team? I don't think this outbound sales thing is going to work unless we pick an angle, because you just can't go out. Like if you saw my outbound sales stuff at the beginning, it was like, are you working on innovation? And they'd be like, leave me alone. Like, what is it even? Because I'm like, what is the thread between all these people, like what? So basically are you doing work?
Exactly.
Do you need help? And so I convinced them to put me on the product management team as like an entry-level product person. So I was like, I did a Scrum Master, certification. And then basically there was no project for me to go on. So I'm sitting on the bench. They had transitioned me off sales, and now I'm sitting on the bench for 6 months. So I'm like, I need to do something that is going to add value, or I'm going to lose my job. So that was like my personal motivation to start posting and trying to get business. And we did a ton of business before we were Fletch, the independent entity. We did a ton of business with the company until eventually we spun off. But yeah, it was very different than Rob. Rob was a senior level product strategy person. He had lots of projects with the company, and it was almost like he kept basically saying, well, like once I started getting a little bit of traction, Rob would use that to the higher ups to be like, let me get in on the project with Anthony, and 2 of us will be better than one. And so he couldn't really go full time on this stuff until way later. And then once we started getting traction, then it was like a power up when we were both doing it together.
Yeah. I would just want to pin another point here, Rob. It's kind of a pattern that I hear, which is how to make LinkedIn work initially when it's slow and it takes time, because people do want to they give it 3 months and they want to see growth, and then they don't see it and they quit. And it's by doing the hustle. And another example of this, I talked to Amir Utley, the founder and CRO at HockeyStack. And he said the same thing. He started posting. He posted 10 times a week, twice a day, every day. And he got like 10 likes per post for the first 4 to 6 months. But he said, the way that I make it work is that every time I post it and I got 10 likes on that post, I looked at who liked that post. And if they were remotely relevant for us, I would reach out to them and ask them if I could basically show them our product and give them feedback and get their feedback, right? And so he just hopped on dozens of calls from those dozens of likes that he got, and that's how he drove business without, getting Adam Robbins style growth. Anthony, I see you're like super engaged in these comments. Mara said, I feel this. I was a bartender for years. Would be fun if Finn roasts our LinkedIn content. 2 questions. Beyond Figna, what tools do you use to manage LinkedIn funnel? And then is there systematic process tools for turning your audience into followers, into clients? Anthony, you said Condo. Is that for both questions, the first or the second question, or?
That's probably the, part of it is just managing. So Condo is basically just a better messaging tool that this guy named Mitchell Tan made, and it's amazing. I would get it if anyone uses like
Superhuman for LinkedIn messages. I think they actually say that on their site, and it's that same workflow. And so if you're a Superhuman user, definitely recommend giving it a
Which one is it? Trycondo.com? When I
think so. That's right.
Superhuman for LinkedIn.
Yes.
So it's like inbox management.
Yeah. It just makes your inbox look 10 times easier, like has all the keyboard shortcuts, because if anyone's used the LinkedIn inbox, it's pretty much a nightmare. And so you can save leads, you can put people in different groups, you can add reminders, you can, fly through your messages the same way that you can do all that kind of stuff with Superhuman.
Wow. That's the only thing. Do you guys use any analytics tools or stuff like that?
We don't. So even the question of like managing the inbound, we have a very informal funnel. Like the metric to us is more tied to the process of be posting, make sure it's new, novel, helpful, like the best content we can create, and then make sure we're executing on our work. That's really all we look at. So we look at some of the engagement metrics, but it's more, I don't know, conversational and qualitative, where Anthony and I are just looking for kind of snippets of like, how's the algorithm handling this type of post? Is it working? But we're not glued to a dashboard in terms of how we make decisions of what to post, when to post, that sort of thing. It's much more organic in how we think about it. And as Anthony noted in the comments, most of our customers have been reading our content for months at a time. Right. And so LinkedIn, even with the low engagement, like people lurk. Like they don't have to hit like to get value out of a message or out of a post. In fact, it's sometimes we'll even drill into it on the calls when people come to us. We'll be like, hey, how'd you find us? And sometimes we'll hear stuff like, hey, been following you for like 6 months or a year. I'm ready to move forward. Sometimes we'll hear a specific post and we get surprised of what post it is. So it's like, what? Like the one that I thought was terrible and didn't get a lot of impressions can make an impression on these folks to then reach out because it's the exact thing that they're struggling with. Right. So pretty low-key tracking on the inbound funnel altogether, other than keeping track of all the leads and meetings that come in and how we move them through our sales process.
Right. And there's often I see like a flip correlation where the decision makers, the most senior people, are the people who are less likely to actually engage on LinkedIn, like writing comments and stuff. That's usually more like the user type, the manager, the people implementing stuff, figuring stuff out on the ground right now. I don't know if you guys see something.
Well, it's interesting though, with there are founders pretty active, and our space in particular.
Yeah.
Yes. And so those are of the folks who reach out to us that eventually become customers. I would say 90% of them are founders. The other 10% are CMOs, sometimes CROs, and the occasional head of product.
Fair. So you guys have never done an analysis where you said, let me look at all of my posts in the last 12 months, see what performed best, figure out what the patterns are, repost the best ones, create themes around the other ones. You've never done this?
No. The closest thing is, I think we did a 7-day trial of Shield and just poked around. But our whole thesis, even when we started posting content, was we didn't want to repurpose. Like we felt like part of what we had going for us was this incredible access to all these companies and all these challenges. And so our secret sauce is like, talk about something new that we're learning or working on or building at the moment. Only recently have we started to repurpose. So of the, 1,000 posts that we have out in the past 1.5 to 2 years, maybe 20 of them have been reposted, but they are all pretty much original. And so, we're optimization has not been a thing. It's more just been, are we being effective? Are we following the process? Are we posting every day? Are we adding value? Like those are the things that are front of mind.
What are some of the more intuitive patterns though that you guys have noticed around stuff that works? Anything like format, topic, when to post, how to post? Like, what are some
I
patterns?
always
Also Anthony. I was just the thing to me is like real examples. If you could tie real examples to a framework that you developed and it's truly unique, those usually do really well because it lowers the time to understand it. And so for a while we were using companies like Loom and Calendly just because everyone knows of them. They have like, you don't have to like pause and figure out, all right, what space am I in? And so and it goes back to the visuals Anthony talked about. Rather than spending 60 seconds reading a post to know what's going on, if you can get it into an image with a real example and people understand the concept in less than 5 seconds, it's usually going to perform fairly well because it creates the conversations. That's the big thing that comes to mind for me. Anthony, what else do you got?
So you introduce a concept and then you give us an example from a company that everyone knows and you say, hey, here's how Calendly implemented this framework or concept.
Effectively, yes. Or at least as a way to demonstrate the idea that you have. Like, go show a piece of work that somebody has. They're like, oh, I know what that is. I know the company. I get that that's their homepage. And then if you can explain how it overlays into key decisions as it relates to positioning and messaging, you're creating fast learning, effectively. It's just like good teaching overall. It's like using an example, using the framework, instead of being very theory heavy before introducing examples and that sort of thing.
Yeah. What are the patterns you notice, Anthony? And Anthony is multi-threading, by the way, guys. If you guys don't have the chat open, Anthony is writing replies in.
I'm trying
now.
I'll join the party.
Yeah, so we follow this lady named Wes Kao, and she co-founder of Maven. She did Alt MBA with Seth Godin. She had these 2 concepts like that were so game changers for us at the very beginning, and have really stayed the same since the whole thing. And you make 2 types of content. One of them she calls the super specific how, which is explaining how to do something at a great level of detail. And so a lot of the stuff we'll post will be like that. Here's how to think about something or do something really in depth. The second one is she calls them having a spiky opinion. This is like where you have your POV, your differentiated view on the world. And like this actually, I think is probably one of the biggest game changers in building an audience, is basically taking advice that is generally accepted and giving counter examples of why you should not follow that advice. So we have like 10 or 15 of these things that have come up naturally related to our service that have like formed like the Fletch way of viewing the world. Like some of the examples are good advice people say that we say is maybe not always so good advice is customers don't care at all about your product. They don't give a rip about your features or what it does. They just care about outcomes. So you should lead with how you can drive their revenue, how you can boost their ROI, all that stuff. And we are like, no, that is not true. People buy products to use them for themselves and their company. And so they actually really do care about what the product does and how it works. And you actually don't help them by obscuring all those things behind a wall of really, vague sounding terms, force them to get on a demo. That's actually not a customer-centric way of messaging. So those types of posts usually get a lot of traction because you will get people on one side being like, well, wait a minute, like defending the outcomes first approach. And then you'll get other people who are like, huh, that does make sense. I usually don't read websites to see how much ROI they can boost me, right? Like I always, I didn't believe I should get this tool, but then I read on their homepage that they would 2x my pipeline. And then I bought. Like that's not how we shop as humans, right? So those types of things. And like you can see examples of this, like Adam Robinson, don't VC, right? Bootstrap, be really profitable, get a lot of money. Jason Fried, keep your company small. Don't go giant venture scale. All these things are like contrary to what most people think. Sure. And so it creates this audience. So those 2 concepts, spiky opinion, super specific how, have been like a North Star since the beginning. And then there's subcategories, right? Like on the spiky opinion, we've also found that like humorous things to make the points, those also do really well. And we've done a bunch of examples where it's like poking fun at a bad advice that we think, but through like almost like memes. And those really tend to perform well.
Do you guys do anything to manage your idea pipeline? Like, do you have right now everything ready for next week and you have it scheduled out? Do you have like a list of ideas and now you just need to build the graphic? Do you just think of something on the day? Like, how do you guys each manage?
Boy, I wish. I would say the biggest step toward that is we recently added a very simple Notion calendar that Anthony set up for us. and what we had done previously was we each separately have just Apple Notes. Like if I were to open up my Apple Notes, you would see probably 1,300 entries, vignettes of ideas to come back to for when you get into that writing time to just suss them out. But I would say very much from the hip in terms of planning. We don't overly orchestrate our content. And I think
You know what you're going to post tomorrow?
I do not.
I don't.
That'll be my stressor for the afternoon to just dig in and reflect on the week. And I think, again, it makes it a little bit more challenging for us, but it forces us to continue to refine and think about what we're learning in the process. And so while we give up a lot of the time to do that, what it really means is we're just staying very, very close to our market at all times. Like our fear is when we let go of content and posting and commenting and handling DMs, which we handle all manually right now, is that we basically create a layer between us and our customers.
Sure.
And when we do that, I think we'll start making poor decisions. Like we'll lose a grasp of what it's like to actually struggle with some of these things. So yeah, very, very chaotic at the moment.
But if I then know that it takes you 90 minutes to 3 hours for a post, does that mean that every day you have a 3-hour block in your calendar in the morning or in the afternoon to make sure that you got enough space in there to actually do this?
It used to, but now no. Now it's more where and how do we fight for this? Anthony has got kids, got another one on the way, and so I'm sure he's being very diligent of finding writing time in the mornings, at night. For me personally, I try and do some bulk writing sessions weekend mornings, and then I'm doing 60, 90 minutes every morning that I try and keep blocked off. That doesn't always stay the case. Anthony, I don't know if you have a different timing workflow in terms of
No, it's very much too it's so funny. Like people are always in really big companies, they're like, how do you justify the value of marketing to the business? Like when it's just two of us, when we have less clients, we're like, gotta post some more. And then we'll post a bunch and then we'll get all these new leads and we're like, okay, we're back. So when we're deep in the thick and like sometimes it's weird, we just use like round robin calendar or Calendly link to basically, if someone wants to work with us, they book on the calendar. It'll either go on my calendar or on Rob's calendar based on their availability. And so it load balances to about the same, but sometimes it will give a bunch to Rob and I won't have that many, and then it'll flip. So Rob will be in a super, super busy season. He's doing all these client workshops back to back, and I'll have less, and then I'll be trying to make as much content as I can. And then it'll flip. And right now, more projects going on, and so I haven't been able to post as much. But I'm the moment we start seeing a drop off in leads, we're gonna be we gotta carve out more time to get it back in. It truly is you pull the lever and then more come through the door.
How are you guys thinking about scaling it? Because you guys are, I don't know if you guys agree, but kind of a little bit at that inflection point where you go from kind of freelancer consultant to now you're running a legit business. You guys are doing over 100K per month, where suddenly it's how sustainable is it to spend 3 hours every day just writing a post on the spot? How can we scale it? How can we streamline it? How can we do this more effectively as we grow the company and become busier? Do you guys think about that at all?
We have, especially a lot recently. I think for a while, Anthony talked about our thesis, we just wanted to focus on doing one thing and doing it really, really well. What people don't see behind the scenes of our frameworks and our process, especially with maybe our first 150 to 200 customers, is we were constantly tweaking the process and the frameworks. Over the last maybe 100, 150 projects, we've reached this level of stability where the frameworks have gotten very strong and consistent, and we're getting consistent quality in the customers that are coming to us. And so now we are at the point of okay, that's stable. Because in the early stages, if we were to try and add scale, add team members, add more customers, we're basically filling a leaky pipe from a delivery standpoint. And so the thesis now is to start mindfully bringing on product marketers, teaching them our frameworks and our models to expand capacity where we can run more projects. Anthony and I can move slightly out of doing all the execution, because what we're also finding is there's different tiers of clients effectively that come through. There are some that are very early that really the framework is the power to them. There are some that are much later that need maybe, Anthony and I's perspective on things because we've seen more of the pattern recognition. And so the short answer to that is building a team around delivery of product marketing and teaching our models now that they're in a good place that are
What's the timeline on this? Because I think there's a lot of product marketing
managers on this call.
Yeah.
So maybe take your chance if you're on this call to like go inbound to Anthony and Rob and
Shoot your shot.
stuff.
Shoot your shot. Yeah, 100%. I'll push the timing question on Anthony more so because I'm just curious of what his answer is today. We've been talking about it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping to hire like maybe 5 or 6 PMMs by the end of the year. So, you know, the next like 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to try to get them. No, I'm just kidding. We
Creating another shit moment over here. Like, what is like,
you haven't been taking those interviews? No, but we realistically, I think we were just talking about this yesterday, and it was like, do we hire 1 to start? Do we hire 2 to start? And so I think we would probably look to hire 1 sometime early next year, spend a good amount of time having them shadow on projects, eventually become more engaged, and then potentially launching those 2 tiers. Because like to Rob's point, right? Like working with an early stage founder, they can't afford a much higher price point, and what we do with them won't last as long because they're going to have to change pretty quickly versus when we work with a company like, you know, a big publicly traded company or enterprise or whatever, the decisions we make with them are going to last like multiple years, and they're going to roll it out across the whole organization. And so like those way more complex projects with 10 C-level executives, you just don't want to take a newer person, even if they're a senior level person, and throw them into the deep end. Like the amount of times me and Rob have been with like the CRO and the CMO and the CEO of a, you know, 5,000 person company are all fighting each other on the call. And like, you have to mediate through that. Like, it's just a lot versus like, hey, we're a early stage startup. We raised $1 million. You know, we're trying to figure out who we should target. We want to help someone to help with our positioning. I don't think that person needs to be charged 5x the cost. And what we ever land on them might only last a quarter because they might say, we're going to try this out. And then a quarter later, they say, we need to pivot. So like, that's the idea, to be like, if we train someone under us, got them really up to speed, they could take those like smaller company projects, not that they're less important, but they just have less long-term ripple effects because you pivot so fast as an early stage company. So lower the price, lower the intensity, and then like the really big, scary projects that, you know, a lot of people wouldn't want to go close to with a 10-foot pole, like maybe me and Rob would just take those ones. And so our amount of time in the actual workshops would exponentially drop, but ideally we're still servicing all these different groups of people.
How do you guys turn all of the attention, impressions, engagement that you get on LinkedIn into customers? Is it just waiting for people to come to the website and book a call inbound, or do you just that?
Basically, yes. We are just waiting. We had to learn the hard way a few times that if we try and force people into a conversation and try and sell our stuff, even if we win the deal, the projects are usually terrible because the value of doing an inbound approach is by the time they come to us and raise their hand, they know our point of view, they know our process. They basically show up to the meetings and say, I'm ready to work with you. I just have 1 or 2 questions to clear out. Those are our favorite projects. Whenever we've had like we have some VC partnerships in place where they'll send us a portfolio company and say, hey, you should work with these guys. The founders get in the room and they're skeptical. They're like, well, my VC said I should work with you to position our company. And we used to be like, well, yeah, here's how we do it, and try and sell. Shittiest projects. We're just pulling teeth. They are not aligned to the way we do things and our approach to product marketing. And so now when that happens and people show up and they're skeptical, like, hey, my VC says I should work with you. Why should I work with you? We say, well, we don't think you should work with us. Like if you don't think that you have a problem we can solve and you aren't a believer in our process and we're very transparent about it, then yeah, don't work with us. You're going to hate our recommendations. And one of 2 things happens. We eliminate the shitty project because they're like, oh yeah, you're probably right. Or, and this is ironically more common, it adds more credibility. Like we know what we know and we know what we don't know. And the founder sees that. And then they're like, oh, okay, I will fall in line. And then they work with us, but they do it from a point of strength for us where they actually believe in what we're doing. And so it's kind of the power of like we are the anti-sale in terms of how we actually approach working with these founders.
I think I love it when you guys are not trying to, hyperscale. And what that means is that you guys have the ability to say no. And what that also means is that you guys can focus on the right activities rather than like people want to get leads from LinkedIn, right? And there's lots of ways to get leads. You can just scrape whoever likes your post and then, run it through some outbound sequence. And now you have leads. That doesn't mean that you'll turn into customers or great customers. They might just take 6 months to move through the sales cycle because they weren't really that interested in your stuff. And by you guys just waiting for the inbound, you get people who are really bought into your approach. They trust you guys. They like you guys. They're not going to second guess every decision and suggestions you're going to make. They probably move through the sales cycle pretty quickly, close at a higher rate. So love it. There was one question that I saw. Anthony's already answering all the questions. Lauren asked, thoughts on valuable in-depth content versus founders who may be worried about sharing the secret sauce, particularly for services. This is a age-old question, and you guys are the perfect people to answer it because you guys literally share what seems like everything.
We're playing the long game. Like, people who think they have secrets to share, at least from a services standpoint, in our view, are kind of shitty consultants. Like, your job is to help people. And if you're taking a marketing approach, like, we view our marketing content as free consulting. Like, we're trying to help as many people with our content, make it as valuable as possible. Are we leaving money on the table doing that? Probably. But in the long term, no chance. And as Anthony's walking through in the comments, like, we treat what we're doing a lot like open source because we're not trying to, and it's ironic because our business model is transactional, but the business is not transactional. Like, we want people to get value up front because over the long term, we build so much trust and credibility in the market that it far outweighs the short-term revenue or customer gain that we have. And so I'd rather have somebody get our stuff for free. And we actually have a bunch of these case studies where they just take our database, they use the principles, do their positioning, rewrite it, and then come back and share all the results. We didn't get $1 out of any of that other than the, I guess you can call it good press of like, I used their frameworks, it was great. And so, yeah, to us, like, that is the competitive advantage, is the open source share everything. If you hide your best stuff, then how do you even begin to stand out? You're already starting to bargain with yourself of what to share, what not to share. And we think that's just silly. Anthony, I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, the other thing too is like the moat for us against other people who do similar stuff is the large trusted audience. So what's the best way to build a trusted audience is to help people for free for a long time, right? Like, that's going to be, wow, I really trust these guys. And I understand that they can do what they say they do because they literally share exactly what they do. Like, we did our entire process. Normally we run 2 main workshops with each company. We did the main 2 workshops with a real company on LinkedIn Live. And we were like,
Wow.
you can watch the whole thing. Like, it's all there, right? Like, we want people to come on the website. When they book the call, I always ask them on the sales call, we send them like a maybe 10 or 12 minute video that Rob made that basically walks through the whole thing. And I say to them, did you get a chance to watch the video? And they say yes. And then I'm like, okay, well, what questions can I answer? And 99% of the time they say, well, I don't really have any questions. I know exactly what you do. I know exactly how you work. I just was wondering, when can we start? And we're like, great.
Put my credit card number.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like any people you would lose who could do it themselves, like, that's fine. That's not really our customer. Like, our ideal customer is people who don't want to do it themselves, and they're just trying to evaluate, what am I going to get when I work with these people? And when they look on the website and they can literally see our library of before and afters, they came in with this is what we changed it, this is what they left with, and they could see our whole process. They're like, oh, okay, this is a really not risky bet because I understand exactly what I'm buying. With most consultants who hide their pricing, hide their process, make you go through a long sales cycle and like all sorts of meetings and stuff, it's a high risk, kind of scary thing. And a lot of times as the consultant, you're doing the education starting after the sales call. So like, we're always like, what would be a better way to teach someone a new way of thinking? Would it be over 4 sales calls on Zoom? Or would it be over 12 months of them reading your content, long form on newsletters, listening to you on podcasts, reading, like, which one is going to help them kind of understand what you're about better? That, or like, hey, you're a referral. Let me tell you about our view on the world over these next 3 30-minute calls with you and your team. And that's going to convince you of a completely different way of seeing things. Like, it's just, especially for the service business, we're like, it doesn't make any sense.
We're running out of time. We have 6 minutes left. Alex ask Anthony and Rob, I love the open source approach on LinkedIn, and after some LinkedIn false starts, I'm keen to emulate. Any advice for service providers just starting out? Anything different in your first 6 months from what you're doing now?
Yeah, I have 2 thoughts, or one that in particular that was really helpful for me starting out. And really Justin Welsh, if you follow him, like big solopreneur. He has a newsletter, you can go find it, where he talks about creating a repeatable way to write every day. And so this goes back to Anthony did his, second viral post, and I was writing but not publishing, and I really always got stuck of like, what am I going to write about every day? Create a recipe to write every day. And so his example is, if like you're really passionate about wine and you're good at Excel and making financial predictions, take a bottle of wine and predict its value every day and just post about it. Little short write-up. My first maybe 100 posts were business model breakdowns. I basically created a scorecard of like, I go to a company, I just give my perspective of like, what are they doing well? Where do I think their risks are in distribution and product and how they go to market? And then I'd do a little write-up, and I'd just walk those out. And then at the end, I'd say, here's what I would do if I was leading marketing at the company. It just got me in the habit of...
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because we're running out of time. This seems to work well if you're still figuring out what you want to do. What if you're the founder and you're like, we sell to customer support professionals?
Yeah.
And so now it's like wine and Excel sheets, but that's probably not going to help you attract customer support professionals. Would you change anything about your approach then if you're already starting out with a clearly defined ICP?
I think it could still apply on a meta level. All you're doing is, if that was your ICP, solve their problem and write about solving it. And that's it. Like, that inside access you have to the issues they run into, the common questions that they can't answer up front, the before and afters, like, you just have to find 1,000 different ways to spotlight that problem, show the approaches of what works, what doesn't work, and show the results. And that is 99% of Anthony and I's content today.
And along those same lines, right? Like, remember how algorithms work, right? Like,
what do you remember? Most people don't know.
They promote contrarian, sometimes controversial things, right? Like, if you just post, this is why like ChatGPT generated content is like usually not very successful, because it's like taking the aggregate of what everyone already agrees with. So it's not going to work. Like, what you want to do is to try to take opinions and point of view. Like I was sharing before, I think there was a YouTube video I watched about like Malcolm Gladwell, and it was like why Malcolm Gladwell's books are so popular is he takes something that everyone believes, but like no one really cares about that much. So like he has the one book called Blink, which is all about people say, well, never judge a book by its cover. Blink's whole premise is, no, you should judge a book by its cover because your initial judgments are usually accurate. So like anytime you can find like just advice, not like super strongly held beliefs, but like beliefs that everyone kind of just thinks are true in your specific space, if it's customer support or HR or whatever, and then write why that's wrong. Like that's the stuff that sticks out because it makes you memorable. And it's like, oh, I always thought this was just the way we did that. And now it's making them revisit it and say, maybe there's something else. And you become kind of this guide who's shining a light on all these mistakes that everyone are making to guide you to the promised land, which then ideally is like the service that you're selling them.
Do you guys have a hard cutoff, or can I ask another question? You guys tell me.
I can go over it. Yep.
All right. So Alejandro said, curious how the content strategy might change for product-focused companies. Would you still focus on the super specific how and the spiky opinions, or modify the approach?
I'll take a stab at that. This is like, for example, does your software need big mindset and behavior change to be adopted? Sometimes it's like, hey, did you know if you don't have this certain thing set up, like the government is going to fine you? Like you have to file this, like everyone had to do this BOI report. And you're saying, hey, I noticed you haven't filed that yet. Like, and maybe your software does that. That doesn't like take a bunch of behavior change. So you don't like need to do like, here's the contrarian thoughts about filing your BOI report. Like you could just point out the problem. Like cold email would probably be a better thing to do than that.
Yeah.
It's more like people if they need to change how they're conceptualizing something in order to use your software, then the same exact principles work. And there's like a sliding scale of where your product might fall. Like Condo, Mitchell, the founder, did not have to spend months and months and months educating me on why the LinkedIn inbox is pretty bad. He's like, you know how it's bad? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I made a better one. I'm like, amazing. Bada bing, bada boom. And I put the credit card in the moment that it was available versus something else that would be like, we're going to, some completely new operating system for the business. Like that would take a lot for me and Rob to switch from whatever we're using and probably would require a lot of thought leadership and long-term opinion change and spiky opinions and super specific hows to make me want to switch or make us, switch to it.
Yeah. I'm going to call you out. I know you had a bunch of questions. Do you want to try to squeeze one in? Whichever one is most relevant to you right now.
Sure. I think a lot of them have been answered anyway, but I was wondering like if there is any point with customers say where you're like, maybe you're not ready for something like a PMM and then you kind of don't work with them and yeah.
Are you saying
It
a
happens
client?
pretty often, I think, when people come to us and maybe don't need exactly what we need. Is that what you're asking about, Adit?
Exactly, yeah, kind of like that. And then yeah, also just to maybe get a bit further, like what exactly are you doing with these clients? Like, are you just doing homepage messaging, or are you doing other stuff? Like, what kind of services do you offer to these companies?
So we're, for us, hyper specific. So we only do one thing. It's always working through the positioning and then translating the positioning into homepage messaging. And so that is our set service. When people come in, and we'll know pretty quickly, like we know the signals of the phrases that they use. If they start talking about brand and excitement and content marketing and go to market, we just stop them right there and say, hey, kind of re-clarify, we're only going to do this one small thing. It sounds like you need a few other pieces. And then we become a guide, like basically a buying guide for them. And it's either, hey, what a lot of people do is they'll work with us to nail the positioning, and then that'll enable them to work with other experts on the go-to-market, doing SEO or writing content, whatever the other stuff is that they want to do. But then we are very clear and say, hey, if that is not you and you don't fit into this, like you probably shouldn't work with us. And we'll just tell them right there so that they don't waste their time. And they appreciate the clarity of that. I guess the other layer of that is sometimes, not as much anymore, Anthony, we used to bump into this sometimes in the first workshop where someone would buy, we'd come in, and then another group would be off in maybe like a brand company level thing. Those are more awkward because they've already paid. But even then, we would come right in and say, hey, it sounds like there's a misalignment here. If you guys really need this other thing, let's just pause. We'll refund the project right now and not move forward. Because what we don't want to happen is we don't want to have to bend to all these custom requests. It's just not how we built our service and our business.
Yeah.
And we don't want them to feel like they're not getting value. And so if either of those are at risk, you have to just nip it right in the bud before it has these like downstream negative effects.
Can you guys try to apply maybe a couple of principles or framework? You guys help companies position their product. Now, a lot of people, when it comes to like LinkedIn and personal branding, people say you got to have a unique point of view. You got to, stand for one word, one thing, which is kind of positioning and messaging, right? And a lot of people are just like, I don't know what I should talk about. I run a software development company. Like, how could someone go from, I don't know what to talk about, to have a very clear, I stand for this. This is my point of view. People associate me with this one clear thing. Any overlap
I'll
here?
steal a phrase from Anthony and then maybe I'll let him run with it. But welcome to the wild world of entrepreneurship. And we get these founders that come to us where they come in and they actually don't really even know what they're building. And when we get to that, like we don't pretend, we're not SaaS product whisperers. We're not going to give, like, we don't know the answers. We just know if you do know who you're building for and the problem you're solving, we know how to unpack that. Basically, do you have insights on your market, on your problem? That's the work we do, is to translate that into a clear and compelling positioning and messaging. If you don't know, we're now in business strategy and product strategy, and we just tell them we're not going to solve that. You have to pick. Anthony, add on to that.
Yeah, and to the same point, right? Like the way we always say it now when we explain it to clients is we're like, all we're doing here is we're going to list out all the potential bets that you could make as a founder. And we're going to say this bet maybe is more likely to come back good than that bet for X, Y, and Z reason. But ultimately, it's your appetite for risk. Where do you want to place the bet? And that's the same thing with everything, because even like, go back to my brother example, right? He was like, I think, because he had been listening to me, had talked to him all the time about this niching down and stuff like that. He's like, I think I'm going to try to sell public speaking coaching to tech leaders who are trying to land their first conference talk. Like the most specific you could possibly go. And through sheer force of will, he has created demand for this service through all these things, and it's now making, maybe a couple grand, maybe $3 or $4 grand a month as a side hustle from doing this. With a different idea, maybe it wouldn't have worked, but maybe it would have, right? That's the whole problem, is the back to lean startup. Like, when do you pivot and when do you persevere? there's just no way of knowing, right? Like it's about your appetite. Like people like Elon Musk, you know, very controversial, love him or hate him, right? Not making any statements about who he is or political or anything like that. But like the guy is a force of will to say, I'm going to try to bring electric cars to the world. And like he could have gone out and tried to validate that people would want electric cars, and people would be like, I don't want an electric car. He'd be like, oh, I did my lean startup validation test. I guess there's no problem, right? Like, but it's like these things are bets and take execution. And sometimes you can bring about something that didn't seem like it could exist, and other times you can't. And there's just really no way of knowing the future because we're making bets about future behavior, and there's no way to predict the future at this point.
All right, guys, this was amazing. There were way more questions than there was time, but I appreciate you guys. If anyone joined late, this is going to go out on our podcast and all of that, so you can catch up on that. Anthony and Rob, I'm going to drop each of you guys' LinkedIn, and I think everyone knows you guys in here, but I'm still going to drop them all in here. There is Anthony and there is Rob. Audience, thank you guys for joining me. Now, Mark, Todd, Ryan, Eddie, Michael, you know, say maybe some nice things to Rob and Anthony. I think they were very generous with their time. Also hustling in the chat. So thank you guys for coming on.
Thanks for having us. Super fun.
All right. Have a good one. Have a good one, everyone.